Hello class, today we're going to talk about chemical bonding. So first of all, an atom that gains one or more electrons is going to have a negative charge because we're getting rid of an electron which has a negative charge. So then that means that we're going to have more protons, which makes it a negative charge. If it loses one or more electrons, it's going to have a positive charge because now you have less protons than electrons. An atom that either gains or loses one or more electrons is what we call an ion. A positively charged ion is called a cation. A negatively charged ion is called an anion. So our first type of bond we're going to talk about is ionic bonds. Atoms are going to transfer one or more of their electrons to another to form that bond. So each atom is going to be left with a complete outer shell. Remember we talked about how there are different levels. Each of those shells can hold a different number of electrons. An ionic bond is going to form between a metal ion that has a positive charge and a non-metal ion with a negative charge. So the main thing you need to know for an ionic bond is that it's between a metal and a non-metal. A covalent bond, on the other hand, is where atoms are going to share the electrons with each other to form that bond. So each one is left with a complete outer shell. So a covalent bond is going to form between two nonmetals. So that's the main thing you need to know. Ionic bond is a metal and a nonmetal. A covalent bond forms between two nonmetals. So let's look at some examples of some formulas and figure out if they have a covalent or an ionic bond. We start with HF, okay? Hydrogen is a nonmetal, so is fluorine. That means we're looking at a covalent bond between those two atoms. If we have NaCl, which we know is salt, we have 1 part sodium, 1 part chlorine, so this is going to be an ionic bond because we have one metal and one nonmetal. Al2O3, we have aluminum and oxygen. One's a metal, one's a nonmetal. That's going to be an ionic bond. H2S, hydrogen and sulfur are both nonmetals, making that a covalent bond. Na2S is sodium and sulfur, which is going to be an ionic bond. MgCl2, magnesium is a metal, chlorine is a nonmetal, so we know that's an ionic bond. And C2H6, carbon and hydrogen are both nonmetals, which means this is a covalent bond. So you can start to see a pattern. Two nonmetals, covalent bond. One of each, ionic bond. One way to think of it is an ionic bond. This looks like a Roman numeral 1. So we could think that they have one nonmetal and one non-metal. So they have one of each. Another thing we need to be able to identify is when we look at an electron dot diagram to be able to identify what element we're looking at. This is kind of separate from bonding, but when we're looking at these electron shells, we need to know what we're looking at. So right here, we know that electrons are found around the outside of the element. So we have 1, 2, 3 electrons. That means that we're looking at the element lithium because it has 3 electrons. If we look at the periodic table, its atomic number is 3, which means it has 3 electrons. Let's look at another example. Right here, we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 electrons. So if you look at our periodic table, boron's atomic number is 5, which means that's the element that we're looking at here. Another example, if we count all these up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, we know we're looking at the element chlorine because it has 17 electrons, the same as its atomic number. So as you look at each of these examples, you should be able to remember or figure out what element you're looking at based on how many electrons. All you have to do is count them up. So again, to review, if we're looking at an ionic bond, you've got the electrons that are being transferred. They're either being given or they're being taken, and it's between a metal and a nonmetal. And a covalent bond is where they are shared, which is a bond between two nonmetals. And that's what you need to know about bonding.